So my husband and I, both 39, have a daughter, 17. I know we had her young. Anyway, I was raised by nudist parents and it kind of stayed with me and grew onto my husband. We tend to walk around our home nude. When my daughter was old enough to voice her opinion on it, she was fine with it and she is always in our home nude when it's just us. Nearly everyone on my side of the family is completely fine with nudity. We usually dress when others come over though. I'm aware not everyone will be okay with the way we live and that's fine. My daughter has never been forced to. It's always on her terms, some days she doesn't want to be and that's fine. We've made it clear that we're fine to wear clothes if she's ever uncomfortable, as long as she lets us know. Not once has she ever said we made her uncomfortable and we leave it at that. However, my husband's family raised him and his family the complete opposite from what I was raised, so we were never told his family about how we live. A few days ago, mother-in-law came over out of the blue, but my husband wasn't home. She says she wasn't here to see him and she wanted to talk to me and ask why I was forcing her baby girl to be naked against her will. Obviously, I'm taken aback and ask what she means. She continues that she found out we were nudists and didn't appreciate it because it was wrong and we needed not to put such poison in my daughter's head. My daughter walks in, clothed, and mother-in-law starts trying to hug her to which daughter pulls away and says stop. I tell mother-in-law to leave her alone. Mother-in-law calls my husband and she starts fussing in this whiny voice about how we were terrible people for the way we forced our daughter to live. And that my daughter doesn't even allow mother-in-law to hug her. My daughter speaks up saying she fine living that way and mother-in-law was being a Karen. Mother-in-law is still going on about how we can no longer be nudists as it was illegal and if we didn't stop she would contact Child Protective Services. That's is when I had finally had enough and told mother-in-law she was fine to not accepting how we live, but she wasn't going to bash my husband or myself and call us bad parents in front of my child. So I tell mother-in-law to leave and left it at that. Husband gets home and says he got a call from my brother-in-law, saying mother-in-law called him in tears, saying I kicked her out and physically removed her, all I did was open the door and told her to go, and I should apologize. After explaining what happened my husband sided with me and his mom is throwing a tantrum about it. Brother-in-law thinks I was in the wrong still and his family has been harassing us since. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. I don't know any families like yours and I think a lot of people would be uncomfortable with the idea of it. That said, your daughter is 17 and it sounds like she is comfortable with it and you have always raised her this way. It's a bit late now for your mother-in-law to try to change things. In under a year your daughter will be an adult herself, so it's good for you to encourage her to make her own decisions and say what she is and isn't comfortable with, like not hugging your mother-in-law. 1. What does she expect Child Protective Service to do over a 17-year-old in her own home who has made it clear that she's comfortable with her parents being nudists and wanting to do it herself of her own free will? 2. Do you go to public places where nudity is legally banned in your birthday suits, or are you only doing it within the confines of your own home where you have an expectation of privacy? While there are inappropriate places to be naked in public, no one can tell you that you cannot do it around a 17-year-old other than the 17-year-old themselves. Not the idiot. Not the idiot. In fact, you need to cut all contact with mother-in-law. Threats of Child Protective Service are not a joke, and cutting communication is the best way to protect yourself. You already heard her lie about your daughter by saying she was forced to live that way. Any other family who sides with mother-in-law you should also stay distant with. She came over to accost you and grabbed your daughter without her permission. If anyone backs that crap up, you should be cautious of them. My boyfriend is 29, I'm 25. When I was almost 18 I was kicked out of home. My parents went through a divorce when I was 14 that got really bitter, and my dad got majority custody of me and my siblings by arguing that my mom's full-time job and irregular hours plus history of mental health issues, depression in her early 20s, but she was in her 30s and well over it by that point. I later found out that the only reason he wanted us was so that he could get the child support. He has been unemployed my entire life. My mom died shortly after I turned 17. She left my dad enough money to cover child support until we were all 18, 2 younger siblings, and the rest in separate trusts that could only be accessed after we turned 25. Long story short, my dad flipped his lid when he found out she hadn't left him anything. At the time I was also going through a really angry teen stage and was pissed that he had just remarried and that he wouldn't let me see mum while she was in hospital or go to her funeral. We spent about 6 months arguing constantly before one day he packed a bag full of my stuff and dropped it at my boyfriend's apartment and told me I wasn't welcome at home. So I spent 6 months living with my boyfriend rent-free. I did pay half the bills and did all the cleaning though. I found a job and ended up moving out. When I moved in, my boyfriend and I had only been together for 3 months, and with the stress of everything we argued constantly, so moving out and getting some space was a good idea. For the last 7 years, we've mostly lived separately with the exception of 4 months when my place was being renovated and I paid half his rent to live with him. So I've just turned 25 and gotten access to the trust. My boyfriend and I have been discussing getting engaged, and I reminded him of this and said that it is happy to pay for most of the wedding since there's a considerable amount of money in the trust. We were also talking about moving in together and had found a nice little apartment close to both our jobs that's within our budget. Problem is, at a dinner with his parents, he brought up how I stayed with him rent-free for 6 months almost 8 years ago now. He went on to say that he felt, since I was now wealthy as hell in his words, that I should pay all the rent on the apartment for the first 6 months, plus the deposit by myself. He finished off by saying that his parents are offering to pay for 1/3 of our wedding. He wants me to pay the other 3/4 by myself, and said that instead of putting some of his savings towards the wedding, he is going to buy a muscle car so he can be a cool dad. Honestly, I couldn't believe it. I walked out of the dinner, footing them with the whole bill, and have been refusing to talk to him. Am I the idiot if I refuse here? Not the idiot. Well done on walking out. His behavior and clearly premeditated plans on how to spend your money are huge red flags. What kind of person would keep score on an 18-year-old who had literally been made homeless with no choice? And also, that's not even a score, you paid the only costs of you living there by splitting bills, and you cleaned for him. You don't owe someone who loves you for something that had zero financial cost to them. For most people, you wouldn't owe them, even if it costs money. Not the idiot, that money is your right. From a legal perspective, your boyfriend allowed you to live rent-free with him by his own volition, and if there wasn't a contract saying you'll allow him to also live rent-free for 6 months, then that's not your responsibility. But honestly, he's shown his true colors with the money you were left. I would ditch his gold-digging idiot before the situation gets worse and he stops working plus expecting you to pay for everything else too, because from what I can see here, it's definitely going that way. Not the idiot. If somehow your relationship recovers from this, you absolutely need to get a prenuptial agreement before you marry this guy. The 6 months of rent would be fine if the rent was comparable. For example, you paid him back for what he did for you 8 years ago, but I'm guessing the place he picked out is nicer or larger or more expensive. The fact that he's expecting you to pay for everything while he blows his money on a muscle car is concerning. It sounds like he's viewing you as a payday, not a partner. The family moved to the unit above us 3 months ago, and they had an autistic son. I don't know how old he is, maybe 10. Since they moved, all we heard is constant stomping, jumping, screaming daily. The only time we get any peace and quiet is when they left for 2 hours and it's business as usual. We see how he stims, I'm sorry I don't know if I said it right, on the parking lot. He jumps and flaps his arms while screaming and moaning. Imagine hearing him do it upstairs with a constant thudding and thumping at minimum 20 minutes at a time, at most 2 hours. Add his daily tantrums and it becomes torture. We take our college classes online and we work from home so we cannot have excessive noise. The noises came to the point where we can't study for our exams. We can't take our exams in peace. We can't watch TV or play video games, and we are lucky if we even get 4 hours of sleep. My boyfriend and us went upstairs to confront them about the noise. The woman at the door told us that he's autistic. I told the woman that I don't care that he's autistic and that she and her husband made the conscious decision to bring their emotionally disturbed child on the top floor apartment, knowing full well how he behaves, and it's disturbing our peace and the neighbors as well, and if she can't control the kid's behavior, then she needs to move somewhere that it's not disturbing us. She can't take her kid outside somewhere where he can let off some steam where it's not disturbing people, and how she handles it is her problem. I'm not going to sit here and revolve my life around her inconsiderate idiot. The dad started screaming at me for what I said to her. We then complained to the landlord about the months of noise we went through, and he told us to call the cops and take it up with them. We called the cops twice a week on them because it was hard to hear my customers on the phone over his tantrums. It was hard to sleep or be in peace that we parent for because of him. The neighbors complained as well, and the lady next door broke her lease and moved because of him. We banged on the ceiling every time when they failed to mitigate the crap for 30 minutes. 2 weeks later I got a final warning from my job that they can hear the kids screaming through my phone, and customers complained about it. I do feel bad at screaming at the lady when I acted in the moment in anger. I am sick of hearing it. My boyfriend said that I was being too aggressive with him, and the dad was pretty pissed at what I said. I don't know. I still think they were extremely selfish and inconsiderate. I understand noise is part of being in an apartment, but when you are in an apartment, especially the top floor unit, there's a level of courtesy you have to show your neighbors, and they were not showing it. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot by any means. It's one thing that the child has a disability. The parents knew that the child had a disability and was well aware of his stimming behavior, but still, despite that, they moved to an upper floor apartment where his presumably unmitigated behavior is disturbing the neighbors. That was very rude and inconsiderate of the people who live next to them. If they can't control the kid's behavior or mitigate the noise by putting carpet or rugs on the floor or taking him out when he has his moments, then they should have moved to the ground floor unit or moved to a square-foot home. Everyone's the idiot here. You for screaming and generally how you approach this family. But you're still absolutely right to feel like the situation is unacceptable and something needs to change. There's a phrase I've seen in regards to issues like this that I quite like: this child's developmental issues are an explanation, not an excuse. The child's not an idiot for behaving like this. But at the same time, that he does act like this behooves the parents to take corrective steps to limit the impact of his behavior on the community at large. Padded floors, maybe a low stimulation room, whatever it takes. Everyone's the idiot here. Autism does not make someone emotional disturbed, nor is it something where you can take the kid to a park and let them run out their energy. You're showing a serious lack of understanding about autism. The family's financial situation may also make it that they don't have much option except to live with nearby neighbors who would be bothered by their son's stimming. At the same time, when their son's stimming is making so much noise their neighbor is about to lose her job over it, they need to start taking some serious action. So my son, 30, and daughter-in-law, 29, were together about 7-ish years, married around 5. She has 2 kids, 7 and 9, from previous relationships, as well as my grandson, 2. Anyway, they started not getting along. I really don't know what happened. According to her, he cheated and yelled too much, and according to him, she left him home with the kids on weekends and disappeared. Who knows? So she decides to tell my son to leave. Rather than cause more screaming drama in front of the kids, he came to my house. Well, the thing is, I own that house. I inherited from my grandmother. I charge my son nominal rent, but no lease, no agreement to buy, no decisions to be made until his student loans get paid off. So his plan, which I agreed with, is to give her 2 months after the divorce is final, then she has to move out. No rent during this time. Divorce will take at least 6 months, so I think she is making out quite well. When she found out, she flipped and called my whole family, calling me a sorry excuse for a woman for kicking a mom out, etc. My daughter thinks I'm an idiot because I should be on my daughter-in-law's side because women should stick together, I guess. She didn't clarify, and I'm letting her cool down before I call. My other family is slipping between saying I should let her stay longer, with my sister and her family thinking I'm nutty for not charging her rent. Other stuff I guess I should probably add. She is a stay-at-home mother. Her other kids' dads are around, willing to take their respective kids if worse comes to worst. My son needs the house back, he can't stay here forever. She can qualify for public housing. She and son are fighting custody. He wants at least 50-50. So, am I the idiot? Not the idiot. She's gone and lost her Cheetos thinking he could live forever rent-free in her ex's family's home. Who's paying the utilities? You're giving her more than enough ample time to get her crap together and move out. Your son should go back and maybe just live in a separate room if you need him out of your current home. Because that other house is yours and with no official lease she can't kick him out. But make sure you go through the proper channels to evict her. That way it's all in writing and legal when she will need to leave. Not the idiot. You were generous with giving her 6 months. She lived there rent-free and could have saved enough to move. It's your property, you should have gone to the courts to evict her immediately and give 30-day notice. She thought she was going to be able to keep the house. It's not her SND, she needs to leave. You definitely should be making her pay rent. It is your son's home but he was living in, I know you only, but that was his home and she thinks she can just take it. I would give her a 30-day notice to leave and legally evict her now. Not the idiot. You are giving her at least 6 months of rent-free living to figure out what to do. If her and your son owned the house, they would still have to figure out how to divide it and maybe sell it. Any divorce creates housing issues. You are being generous while also protecting your interests and your son and grandson. Make sure you send her written notice right away and ignore anyone who says women should stick together. As a feminist, it's insulting and derivative of actual empowerment. My mom and I rent the mother-in-law suite of a house. We've only been here about 6 months and I haven't met many of the neighbors because of COVID. Plus we move around a lot, so it is hard to make new friends every new place. I spend more time inside video calling my friends. Last week it was evening and I went to sit outside and read a book. There is a small park and playground shared by the neighborhood and it was empty that evening. I sat on the swings and read for a while and then some guy came out of the nearby house and said that I couldn't be there, this was just a park for the neighborhood. I said yes I know, but I could be there because I live there. He said no I don't, he knows everyone knows each other here. I was getting kind of annoyed and told him obviously they don't because he doesn't know me. He asked to see my ID so he could see my address, and while I do have a learner's permit for driving, I felt sketched out showing someone who was mad at me where I live. So I said that I was not an adult, it was sketchy, he was demanding the address of a girl out alone at night and I wanted him to leave. I also texted my mom to say that I was in the park and some guy was upset I was and wanted my home address and I didn't feel okay saying it, so what should I do? Before my mom saw the text though, the guy stood there and called the police about a teenager trespassing in the park. I tried to walk off, but he started to follow me and I felt uneasy walking to my house because my mom had always said to not lead someone to your house if they're giving you trouble, try to go somewhere public and get the police. So I thought maybe it's better to just stay and talk to the police. They showed up and talked to the guy for a bit, then to me, and asked me where I lived. I showed them my learner's permit and said I lived in the subdivision that the park was in. They were kind of frustrated at the wasted time, I felt like, and were asking me why I couldn't have told the guy what I told them. I said I did, everything up to my exact address because he was making me nervous. They were like okay, but also kind of talked down to me to tell me that this isn't that kind of place and seemed to think I was just too cautious and didn't need to be. And that the guy was a guy who was like a leader in the community and who could be trusted. They seemed kind of irritated I still didn't want to chat with him and tell him my side of things. I still asked them to say that it's okay for me to be here, but don't say my address. Am I the idiot for not telling this guy who thought I was trespassing my address to prove I wasn't? Not the idiot. You're an underage girl and having an adult man yelling at you and demanding your address for what he calls trespassing when you're just chilling at a place you're allowed to be is grounds to call the police for your safety. Not that police actually help with that usually, but in an ideal world it would be the case. The police in this scenario is also in the wrong as they should understand your hesitation in this situation rather than be irritated at you for it. The police you spoke to were completely in the wrong here and gave you terrible advice. Always trust your gut in these situations and you won't go far wrong. Sadly there are too many people who seem trustworthy out there and are upstanding in the community who turn out to be the worst kind of people. This man was a stranger to you and you were absolutely within your rights to not give this man who basically stalked you the time of day.